Hey, I'm Chuck with Materialize, and today we're going to look at how to get your Kafka data into Materialize. Let's do it. In particular, today we're going to be working with Confluent. So here I am in Confluent Cloud, and I have an environment called Chuck Demo, and I have a cluster running, I have some topics going with some data being produced, and I have a schema registry. I've already created a API key for the schema registry and can manage your credentials over here. So I created my API key, and I also created an API key for my cluster. So if I go into my cluster, API keys, I create an API key there. So I have authentication into my cluster and my schema registry. And we'll see I have a couple of topics going, a stream of items, purchases, and users. And we'll just go into one of these and check that the data is flowing. And it looks good. So here I have an item, and we have a key, which is the item ID. And the schema for these items is in the schema registry. So our goal is to take this topic and combine it with some of these other topics to create views that I want up to date all the time. And a really great system to do that with is Materialize. So let's go over to my Materialize environment. To get our Kafka data into Materialize, we need credentials to connect to that Kafka cluster. Materialize handles credentials in objects called secrets. So here are some secrets that I created a long time ago for a different Kafka cluster, but the idea is the same. We're going to create a username and password secret for Kafka, and same with schema registry. Then we're going to create connections. These objects establish and maintain the networking connection between Materialize and Kafka. So we'll have a connection for Kafka and a connection for the schema registry. And finally, once we're securely connected to Kafka and schema registry, we can start to create sources. So right now I just have a simple load generator source, but I'll want to create a source for each of my Kafka topics. Now all of these objects can be created in the UI with this button over here on the top right. So for example, new source. But I'm going to choose to make all of these things directly in SQL. Okay, so the first step is to create those Kafka credentials. So we create secret Kafka username and create secret Kafka password. Don't worry, this API key and this entire Confluent environment will be destroyed before you ever see this. Let's go ahead and create those secrets. And now that those credentials are in place, I can create the connection to my Kafka cluster. So here we create connection, calling it Kafka, and we're specifying our Confluent Cloud broker, and we're specifying our username and password by referencing those secrets. And Confluent Cloud always uses the plain SASL mechanism. Now let's create a connection for the Confluent schema registry. Again, first we're going to create these secrets. I'm going to call it SR username and SR password. And let's create the connection to the schema registry. And again, we're referencing those secrets. And here we use the URL provided by Confluent. Okay, next let's create the sources. So first I'm going to do the users topic. We're going to call it users. We're going to use that connection called Kafka, and we're going to use that schema registry connection called SR. And the key format is bytes, and the value format is that Avro schema from the schema registry. And one key thing to notice here is the envelope. So here we're using envelope upsert. And what that means is if we see the same key twice, we're going to interpret that as an update. Other envelopes you might want to use are envelope none, which if you see the same key, doesn't matter. It's just everything is a new insert. That's envelope none. And then there's also envelope Debezium. So if you're doing change data capture from a database using Debezium, we support that and interpret that natively. Okay, let's create the source. All right, source created. And same thing with purchases. Source created. And then finally, items. Source created. All right, let's go ahead and show sources. And we see we have the items, purchases, and users. And each of them comes with this progress source as well, which gives you metadata about how much progress Materialize has made in reading that Kafka topic. Okay, so now that we're ingesting the data, we want to do something with it. So I'm going to move to a compute cluster I've called Chuck. So here I'm in a compute cluster, and this is where I'll create a couple of views and indexes, and we'll do some queries. What I'm inputting now is pretty complicated, but the details don't matter at the moment. I'm just going to create all these views and indexes, and then we'll see what happens. So under the hood, when these indexes are created, they are kicking off a data flow in Materialize that runs continuously and stays up to date as new data arrives. Okay, so let's read from one of these views. We notice the answer was returned almost immediately, and that's because no actual work is being done. This result is being processed continuously, and so when I issue a read, I'm just reading a pre-computed result. To see the changes propagate in real time, we're going to issue a subscribe query. So as we catch up to the latest values in real time, these records are being updated, and you'll notice some deletes as well. That's because we're only looking at the last minute, and so as purchases fall out of the last minute, we're going to be issuing deletes in that result set. All right, let's stop the stream. So that's it. To get your Kafka data into Materialize, you create your credentials, which we did, and you create your connections, you create your sources, so these are your Kafka topics, and then you apply arbitrary SQL on top of them, and Materialize will keep those results up to date. Thanks for joining.